Hello and welcome to today's video. This is probably the most fun video that you get to film for like the 2022 like end of year wrap up season, because these are the books that I consider the best books that I read during 2022. These are, I think I picked 10 out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yes, 10 books that I think are like the best of the year. I will say a few things, a few disclaimers. One, I love these books, obviously. Doesn't mean I gave them all 5 stars. I can see flaws in books and not necessarily give them 5 stars and they still be the best books that I read. On the same note, I gave more than this amount of books 5 stars this year, but it doesn't mean that they made it to like the best. Basically I put this pile together, I put this together based on instinct. I looked through the books that I read during the year and picked out the ones that I was like yes, 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 and then whittled it down basically, and these are the ones that I'm left with. And the final little disclaimer thing, if there was an author that had more than one book that I was considering to make this list, I only allowed one book to make the list. So yeah, once you see a book by an author, that author won't appear again, even if, say, like I feel like there were other books that I read by the author that were like almost as good or potentially the same level, because I literally just the day I picked these out I decided. And I mean, I'm happy with it, but there are definitely some authors in here where I read multiple books or multiple series by them and I've only selected one. I'm happy with my selection. I definitely think the books I've selected are the ones that weren't necessarily the best, like in terms of like being observant and thinking about it and being correct, but in terms of like me, how I feel, how I think, my emotional impact, how long I thought about it after reading it, all that sort of thing, these are the books. These are the 10 best books of 2022 that I read. So yeah, I'm literally just going to be picking them off and talking to you about them. The piles themselves, this pile, I mean I know there's a bookshelf in between, but it is one pile. They're not in any order. I couldn't do that. I couldn't order them. I couldn't figure out in my head what was better than what and like try and pit them against each other. I just couldn't. So what I have done is I've placed them in the order that I read them. So the first book that I show will be the book that made this list that I read. I mean I think I read it in January, but either way it's like the one that I read first out of all of these, and the one at the end of the list is the one that I read most recently. And that's just how we're going along with it. That's what we're doing. I'm very excited. If you watch my holiday vlog for the year, we went on holiday for a week and all 3 of the books that I read for that holiday vlog have made it into this. And like I do feel like there could be something to say about that. Did the setting impact that? Did my chill, calm experience, no expectations, no nothing, make me feel better about them? Yeah, maybe. And like maybe that's a discussion for another time. But for right now, let's get into the books. So the first book on the list is Pangaea. This is by Hinnah, Mian, and this was amazing. I first read this in January. I got a copy on NetGalley to review as like a Yolk. I read it all and loved it so much that I ordered the book. I can't wait to at some point sit down with this and reread it and be able to annotate it and put in feelings and thoughts. This impacted me so much in so many ways. It's only the second book that the author has brought out. It's the second poetry collection. There was so much in this. It hit so hard. It was so emotional. It really impacted me. But not only did it impact me on like reading this and loving it level, it impacted me by like expanding what I read. I have picked up so much more poetry since finding this and finding that this is the sort of poetry that I enjoy. I now prioritise poetry. Like, I mean I'm still not reading loads, but I'm reading more, and I feel like this really caused that and caused me to realise like this is the sort of poetry I want. Like I want this modern style of poetry but that still keeps a very poetic structure that you'd see at school, but the modern style of it, and also wanting it to be about something important and impactful and something that really makes me feel emotions. Yeah, absolutely loved it. It's such an easy 5 stars. Like I assume I gave it 5 stars. If I didn't, I should up the rating because this was amazing. And it's a book that I see myself revisiting multiple times in my life. So yeah, that is the first book of the year that I read and made it to this list. And yeah, I don't have a lot else to add. I will say, if you are going to read it, do check the trigger warnings. It's a collection of poetry about working through trauma inflicted on the body, whether the trauma comes from a person, a country, or from within. And it really is about that. Like every single thing in here is such a different insight and a different way of thinking about that, and how different things can affect you both physically and emotionally. So yeah, that is book number 1. Then the second book on this list is Winterkeep. This is the 4th book in the Graceling Realm series. This book means so much to me. Like, this is the first book. Like, I've annotated books before, I've tabbed books before, but I've always done it where I've found something online, I've found something to help me set up a system. This is the first book where, going into it, I wanted to tab it so much, I wanted to know so much, that like I made my own tabbing system, I set it all up. Like, oh, I read this book. Like, oh, I can remember late at night trying to stay up reading it with my little book light, but still wanting to tab it, so I had to like keep it going. And yeah, oh my gosh, like this book gives me so much joy, honestly. That's the easiest way to put it, just so much joy. This is the 4th book in a series, so I can't really talk much about what this exact book is. The world that it is set in, the Graceling Realm, which is the like series title, is a world where when you are born, or very early on within like your development of life, you get 2 different coloured eyes. Not everyone does this, just certain people get 2 different coloured eyes. And if you have these 2 different coloured eyes, then it means that you have some sort of grace. And this grace can be absolutely anything, but it will be something very specific. So for instance, you could have a grace of archery, which just means that you are brilliant, you are the best at archery, like that is your thing, you can do it. But just because you're born with 2 different colours of eyes, you don't know that your grace is going to be archery. You have to still figure that out. Like, and even if you're starting to figure out that these things that come easy to you don't come easy to others, you still don't necessarily know your grace. And yeah, it's very, very interesting, and obviously it develops so much from there. This is the 4th book. I feel like for me this is the first book that has kind of started bringing the world together a bit. It's still very much a separated world, but in this book we see a character that we already know, we've already met in previous books, and is a perspective we're familiar with by this point, go to a different part of the world. And it is a part of the world that I believe we'd heard of it before, but we haven't seen it, we didn't really know much about it, and it was just amazing. This is also, I can't say for definite, but it's the first one where like multiple people's perspectives really came into it, and the different perspectives coming together and seeing these different things really built the story so much. I need to stop talking. It's going to take ages if I keep talking this much about every book, but yeah, I love this. It was great. I can't wait to read the next book in the series. The next book has come out, but not in paperback yet, unfortunately. But yeah, I can't wait to keep reading and to read more of this. Then the next book on the list for the best books I read during 2022 is Station 11. And not only is this the best book that I read, I think this is potentially the best audiobook that I read as well. I did read this along with the audiobook. The audiobook that like I had access to through my library was a full cast audiobook, and oh my gosh, I did not expect to enjoy this as much as I did. This is a book about pandemics, and that was something I was very aware of going into this. It was a whole thing, a whole concept that I had this idea of reading books about pandemics. But oh my gosh, this was amazing. So we start out with this book, we are there on the night of a pandemic hitting. We see the initial effects, and it's a very fast acting pandemic. It acts very, very quickly, and we follow that storyline, and we follow a storyline 30 years into the future, seeing these places of civilization, how people in society are living, how this has affected the world, and we see that aspect of it. And we also follow a storyline 10 years previous and see just these people live this normal life. And I don't want to say too much, but by the end of the book all these storylines come together in a way that you hope for but you don't really expect, and it was great. It was so interesting. And our main sort of thing that we follow, our main people we follow, is a travelling symphony and they perform Shakespeare. I was worried going into this that my knowledge of Shakespeare wouldn't be good enough, but it was fine. I enjoyed it so much. Yeah, like, you don't need to have that knowledge going into it if that is something you're worried about. But yeah, this was amazing. I can't believe how much I enjoyed this book. It was one of those that once you started, you just did not want to put down. And I don't really want to say much more about it, because if you haven't read it, I went into this knowing so little, and that is how I would recommend going into it as well. So much happened in this that surprised me, so much happened in this where I just didn't expect it. But even when I thought something could happen, when I thought something would be the case, I wasn't just thinking that. I was thinking like this and this could be linked in this way or this way or this way or this way. And like sometimes it was one of those ways, and that was so cool and so satisfying. But a lot of times it was also a way that I hadn't even thought of. And yeah, I just, yeah, would recommend. It was great. It was an amazing time. And if you are going to give it a read, I definitely recommend checking out the audiobook, as that could be something that you vibe with. And I definitely think it enhanced the experience for me. And then the fourth book for the list is Yolk by Mary H.K. Choi. This is my first Mary H.K. Choi novel, and I would definitely be picking up more in the future. This was amazing. It made me feel so much. I mean, you wouldn't really know it from like looking at this list. I think only half of the books on this list are like sci-fi fantasy, but like that's the main genre I read. And I read this so close to the start of the year, it really blew me away. I wasn't expecting to like it, I wasn't expecting to enjoy it. I had hopes, and I'd gone through basically, this had been recommended in a few videos that I'd watched at the start of the year. I can't remember now, but I'd seen it and it sounded amazing. And it sounded so impactful and so different to anything I'd ever read before, and even now this is so different to anything I've ever read before. We follow two sisters, Jane and June. I don't want to say even what it says on the back, because I think going into it more blind than this is an amazing way to go into it. Essentially, we have these two sisters, and they don't particularly mesh, they don't particularly get along, but something happens in their life and they need to start working together. They need to have this love, but they're both going through struggles at the same time with this, and they're both going through very different struggles. They are both aware of each other's struggles to a certain extent, but many things are revealed throughout the book, many things happen, and we see a lot of growth in these characters. And what I really enjoyed about this, the ending of this wasn't concrete. It didn't end and you felt like everything was complete and finished, but that was also the perfect way for it to finish, because these are very young sisters. I think they're both in their 20s, so it wasn't the end. Like, it wasn't the end of their lives, it wasn't the end of like what was happening. It really was just a part of their story, and how this book dealt with it. I mean, I will definitely say check trigger warnings before going into this one. It is one that there were so many topics explored in this, so many that I wasn't expecting, and I do feel like you do need to look after yourself when going into this one. It is heavy. Yeah, like, yeah, I can remember like literally having people round and only having like 30 pages left and just being like, I'm just gonna lock myself away and finish this, because like I can't put it down at this point. I need to finish it. Oh, I found another prompt card. That's for my TBR game. I am missing quite a few, so one's just fell out of this book. But yeah, I can't believe it, and I don't feel like I'm really like explaining very well how good this book was, but it was so good. So my camera died and I had to charge the battery, and then the sun's gone, so the lighting is very different, but let's just pretend that you can't tell. On to the next book. We have Kingdom of Ash. I finished the Throne of Glass series this year, and like, don't get me wrong, like picking a Sarah J Maas book to go on here was difficult because there were multiple I enjoyed, but this was such an amazing conclusion to a series that I just had to pick it. Like, it was the conclusion I wanted, and although books can make me emotional, I wasn't expecting it from a series like this. I was, wow, I was not okay after reading this. It doesn't sound like a compliment, but I was not okay after reading this. So much happened, so much went on. Yeah, I mean, it's a great series, and I feel very satisfied by the ending of it. I really enjoyed it. I had a good time. I was gonna say a fun time, it wasn't a fun time, I don't know. It's difficult to say because this is the last book in a very big chunky series. We start off the series following Selena Sardofian when she is rescued from the salt mines. Kind of rescued-ish rescued, whatever. And we follow a journey, a big journey. None of what I just said is even relevant to the last book in the series. But yeah, this was a great series and this was an amazing conclusion. All the perspectives that we end up hearing from kind of got concluded in this, but still with some openings where I personally am very hopeful that maybe a particular sharp clawed character will potentially get their own something in the future. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. It was great and it was a great ending to a series. I didn't feel like negative towards it in any way, and a lot of series finish shit so seeing this finish good was so satisfying and so great. Then we have Foul Lady Fortune. This is another author, Chloe Gong, where it was difficult to pick which book to include, but this is the most recent release and I enjoyed this one more. I did. That's the basics of it. I enjoyed all of them, but all of them added onto each other so much that now at this point this is like, yeah, the best one. So this is the first book in a series, but it's a series that continues on from the first series. So you can read this series without reading the first series, but you will be spoilt for the first series, basically. And this is great. So in this one we follow some characters as main characters that were side characters in the first one. And this was so interesting. It's set in 1930s. Yeah, in 1930s Shanghai. There's a mystery, there's intrigue, there's political plot, there is a fantasy element that I was not expecting to get in this. A fantasy element, a mysterious how is this possible that was not in the first duology. And I just had such a great time. I read this all so quickly as Yolk and just I had to get this once it came out. This is definitely one I'm going to reread. This is definitely one that I'm going to like annotate and tab and relive again because it was honestly great and it really expanded upon what we got from the first duology as well. And the characters we follow are so interesting and also little hints are given about the first one as well, like the first duology. And yeah, I'm struggling to talk about it because I don't want to spoil anything from the first one, but this is what this is the one I've included. It was by far the best in my opinion. I love the direction it went, I love what we've got to explore, and I cannot wait for more in this series to come out. Like, I cannot wait. Another one that's going to be difficult to talk about because it's like the 5th one in a series is Network Effect by Martha Wells. So this is a Murderbot novel, but most places that I can see class it as one of the Murderbot diary books. So the Murderbot Diaries is a set of novellas that follow our character Murderbot. This is book 5, but like it's the only like full-length novel. A few places class it differently. I'm just classing it as part of the series. That's what it says on Goodreads. That's like, I don't think you could read this book without having read the others, so yes. So this one is Network Effect and I cannot really tell you a lot about it, but it was great. It, compared to the first 4 books in the series, which I loved, I enjoyed, they were so amazing, this one just expanded more. Like we had more space, we had a bigger story, and that's what I do kind of prefer reading, like these bigger stories. So much happened in this, so many characters we've met before were in this, and it was a great time. I feel like I learned more about the world because the amount of space and the amount of pages that we had to just discover new things. I feel like we learned more about Murderbot and what it wants, and yeah, I loved it. It was great. The first book, All Systems Red, is the first one in the series, and we follow Murderbot, who is a sec unit, and it has hacked its governor module so that it has like control over itself, and we just go from there. There's so much. I don't know how to explain this series. I don't really know what to say. I'm finding this very difficult. The first few books I spoke about were all like standalones or start a series or something. I don't know how to talk about this because it's so far into a series, but it's a great time. And if you've started reading Murderbot and enjoyed it, it only gets better and better, and this one to me is just amazing. Next up we have the only non-fiction to make the list this year, and that is I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jennette McCurdy. Wow. This was intense. It spoke about so much, it did so much, and this writing style, everything. I've heard since reading this that Jennette McCurdy wants to like write novels, like fictional novels as well, and I feel like her writing style will really like make those successful too. So much went on. This spoke about so much. It's about child stardom, it's about relationship with parents, especially relationship with moms, it's about eating disordered, it's about honestly so much, and I think it has a lot of nuance to it as well, a lot of things that are just very specific to the situation. And the most interesting thing about this, like, it is a memoir, we are mainly focusing on these certain topics. It's not written looking back on it. We don't have Jennette McCurdy sat there now writing this looking back on it. Like, we do, obviously that's how she wrote it. But as we start at these early chapters as like a young child, she's writing from her perspective of being that young child. It's not till the very end that we really get her looking back on it and giving us a little bit of information as to how she feels now. It is very much written in the moment, and you know, for a large proportion of the book she's growing up, she's young, she doesn't have maybe like the understanding and the ability to cope with these things that an adult would. Yeah, this blew my mind. This honestly, like, yeah, I mean, I wrote in this, I tabbed it, I highlighted it, and like, I mean, I don't do that in all the books that I love, but there was so much in here that I just needed to like write about and add my own notes on. And like, yeah, so there's a point at chapter 40 where like it really became a thing that the age she was at that chapter, she'd become aware of like some of the wrongdoing, some of the things that like weren't okay. And like, I just needed to know that. I was like, this is the age she is, this is how long it's taken, this is the first thing that's happened. Like, yeah, this was great. If you haven't read it, I'd really recommend it. I'd really recommend the audiobook. It is narrated by Jennette herself, and it is on Scribd. I always have a link to Scribd in my description, so if you don't normally listen to audiobooks but want to give it a go, you can get 60 days free through that link. So yeah, I'd really recommend it. Obviously, again, for this one as well, do look after yourself, check trigger warnings, eating disorders and child neglect, I guess, but not really. I don't know, it's very difficult to talk about, it's not my experience, but there's a lot of things in this I would maybe just read up the trigger warnings and see. There is a lot of ways that Jennette is treated as a child, and also things that she still struggles with as an adult that are in this. So yeah. Then we have The Bullet That Missed. Oh, this was so good. This is the third book in the Thursday Murder Club series. I don't know how to describe this. This book for me felt like the best one so far. This was the third one, and I feel like it expanded upon a lot of things. We saw character development, which is fucking crazy to say, honestly, because we're following 80-year-olds. Like, I don't know, I can't imagine myself at 80 years old, like, developing my character and changing who I am. But, like, we see that in these books. Like, especially compared to, there's a certain character that in book 2 a lot of things happen, and book 2 to book 3 we see so much growth and so many things, and it's great. Book 1, The Thursday Murder Club, we meet 4 80-ish-year-olds who live in a retirement village, and every Thursday meet up in the jigsaw room to go over cold cases and try and solve them. And in book 1, not long into it, we have a murder happen right on their doorstep, and they have their first case that is happening and unfolding in front of them, and they get to try and wiggle their way in and help solve it. Book 2 expands from that, book 3 expands even more, and each book kind of mainly focuses on a very different case and a very different thing that's happening. This one was interesting because it was the first time that we kind of got to see them actually looking at a cold case and like discuss it that way. I loved it. I don't really know what else to say. The characters are great, the feelings it gives you are great, it's funny. So many people in my life have got to read this series now. I don't think any of them are at book 3 yet, but like, they need to. I'll keep pushing. I really recommend this series. I think this series doesn't always have amazing ratings, I will say that, and I know not everyone watching is from the UK. It has very British humour in it, and I have seen a few like American people, I mean, I'm sure people from all over the world, but like I've personally seen a couple of American people on like BookTube, so like the humour wasn't really for them, and I really do feel like that is because it is British humour. As someone who lives in the UK, I completely get this, but I think the only thing I would say is if you don't live in the UK, if you don't like have a lot of the type of like banterous humour, maybe it might not be for you, basically, is what I'm trying to say. But that's the only thing that I've seen like negatively said, and like why it hasn't got as high reviews as like you might think it would, is that aspect. And I do think it is just because it is very localized. Like this, the descriptions you get in this, the things that you get, this old retirement village, this little cozy town, these country lanes, like I can see all that. Like you could go to any random small village in England, drop a pin and see those things, and like because I live here I can see that. But this might not resonate with everyone and every audience, but I think it's amazing and I really recommend it. Then the last book that I'm going to talk about today, the 10th and final book that is making it onto this list, is Her Majesty's Royal Coven by Juno Dawson. I don't even know what to say. This was great, this was amazing. Honestly, I haven't given it the full 5 stars in its rating, but I feel like the next book and the series as a whole has potential to be a 5-star series, and like it still was one of the best books I read because I'm still thinking about it. I read this in October and I'm still thinking about it. It was so good, it was so interesting, and I feel like for me the problem, it took a long time. This is a new world, this is a new thing that we're getting into, and it is based in like our world. HMRC is, if you live in the UK, is the tax office. It's who you pay your taxes to. In this world, HMRC exists. It is still the thing that every like human perceives it to be, but it's actually a way for witches to help with the country's problems and keep everything under control. So yeah, it took a long time to get into. I really enjoyed our characters, some a lot more than others, some I hated by, you know, a quarter of the way in, but I felt like that was very intentional, and I'd say the way this book moved on, it was intentional. The ending of this I don't even know how to talk about. Like I finished this book is finished, and there's so many open things, there's so many cliffhangers, there's so many things still to be explored. I have no clue how book 2 is going to go, because the ending of this, I literally don't even know how book 2 will start. I don't know like how we're going to solve this, how now as the reader, like I have knowledge that the characters don't have in here now, and I don't know how that's going to play out in book 2 because it's some serious shit. Yeah, I really enjoyed this. I'm really intrigued. I've pre-ordered book 2. I'm ready for it. I'm waiting. I'm like so ready for it to come out and find out how this story is going to happen, how this story is going to go, and like how is it going to change and move on from this. Like I don't know, but I'm so excited to find out more. And like the fact that I was still thinking about this like weekly, I probably still think like, but that happened, that actually happened, like, but no one knows that happened. Like yeah, the fact that that is still a 4, like it had to make it to the best books. So here it is. So those are my best books of 2022. I know I spoke about some of them loads and some hardly at all. I've just gone with vibes. I didn't plan this out at all. So this is just what we're getting. I do really hope that you enjoyed the video. Tell me your favourite books down below. Did any of my favourite books make it into your favourite books? Yeah, let me know. I do really hope that you enjoyed the video. Do give it a like if you did like it. Subscribe down below if you'd like to see more content like this. I do upload every Monday, Wednesday and Friday. Hopefully, I'll see you next time. Bye.